What's up, Internet? You're tuning in episode 82 of the FlipScreen Games Podcast, a weekly video game podcast where three best buds from different nations come together to discuss the wide world of video games. I'm your host, Pete and Bessie, joined, as always, by my very good friends and co-hosts, Mr. Stephen Radford.
Hello, hello.
And Mr. Max Wright.
Ahoy, ahoy.
Welcome back to the show, boys. We got a jam-packed one for you. We got the headlines that The Last of Us at HBO maybe getting a third season? And what does that mean? What does that mean? There's a lot of implications, a lot of questions there. We're going to talk about all of them. But we've also got a bunch of other stuff to get in on the back end, including some talk about Resident Evil 4 and what's going on over at Xbox. We got a lot to get into today, so let's jump right into it. In an interview over at GQ Magazine, Neil Druckman, of course, one of the co-creators of The Last of Us, one of the executive producers on the HBO show, suggested that the show may have a season 3 while adapting The Last of Us Part 2. And I'm very interested by this, especially depending if the expectation is that the length of each season will be the same. I think that has some very interesting questions. Steve, I want to start with you. What did you make of this?
Yeah, I think it kind of makes sense, right? Because The Last of Us Part 2 is a much longer game than the first one. So if you want to keep it to that 9 to 10 episode length, doesn't really make sense. Plus, knowing The Last of Us Part 2, I could kind of see it spreading over 3 additional seasons with the acts that they've got. Like you could have Act 1 where you're playing as Ellie, Act 2 where you're playing as Abby, or you're viewing it through kind of Abby's eyes, and then like Act 3 could be what happened afterwards, potentially going in further on. Because we also had the kind of offshoot episodes in season 1, and we'll talk about this. We're probably going to do a bit of a spoiler cast for season 1, where we saw more backstory about characters we hadn't known about. In that same interview, Craig Mazin, the creator of the series, said it will be different, just as this season was different from the first game, and sometimes it will be different radically, and sometimes it will be barely different. So I'm interested to see what differences there'll be. Obviously, it's not going to be one season. He went on to say, it's more than one season. You've noted correctly that we will not say how many, but more than one season is factually correct. So I do wonder how many it's probably going to be split across, or whether they just don't know at this point. It could just be, we're still writing it. We've not kind of outlined what we're going to do. As it kind of comes to pen to paper, the ink's flown, and we'll figure out how many episodes we write, and then we'll split that up into seasons and what seems to fit. Because one thing that was really clear with how they produced the show was they weren't restricted by timescales. You know, we've noted on previous episodes that some of the episodes of the shows were an hour and a half. The finale of the season is 43 minutes long. So they don't really care about hitting that like 1 hour mark. This is the story we've got to tell. These are the chapters we're kind of breaking it up into, and this is where we're kind of happy for it to be.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think when you put it in that context, that statement does make a lot more sense. I would like to talk around spoilers for The Last of Us Part 2, because obviously I think a lot of people are getting into it for the first time now, Max being one of them, right? But I think, Steve, for you and I and other people who have played through both games, I think there's a pretty obvious point where you could see an ending for season 2 and then where a season 3 would pick up. And
definitely, but there's also like a point very early on in the game where I could see them wanting to do more backstory, especially with like the relationship between Ellie and Joel, and where it ended at season 1.
Of course,
because there's like such a huge gap between part 1 of the game and part 2 of the game. Many years has passed. They've been back home, as Joel puts it, at the end of part 1, and we know that Ellie's got into like a relationship and she's moved on, and kind of there's like a bit of a tension between her and Joel for whatever reason.
There's a lot of characters there that get introduced to that, I'm sure they'd want to take the time to flesh out more. Like I remember there was an Easter egg teasing, or at least I thought teasing Dina in the first season, and like you imagine that's a character who might get an episode dedicated to
Yeah,
him,
I
right?
thought so too. Yeah.
And then there's like Jesse, who's a character who might get an episode dedicated to him, right? And then of course, on the other side of the fence, right, there's all of the characters that are kind of the antagonists that will meet surely in the first half of that season. But we might not, there's a lot. You can definitely see how they could flesh out a 9 to 10 episode season from the two halves of the game, I think, pretty easily. And honestly, like I'm excited. I'm excited for them to have the space to do that because I think the episodes that have been more character focused and have given more attention to side characters have been some of the best ones.
Oh, me too. And I 100% want to see more of Lev's story
Sure.
and kind of where that went and what happened and how they got to where they were and like 11 Abby and all of that side of things. I don't feel like the game really went into too much detail prior to that. And I don't want to talk about Lev's situation too
I
much
think
'cause that
we'll
is
leave it
a
at that.
spoiler
Yeah.
for the game,
but I think in
um,
the same way that like Bill was a character that we learned a lot more about in season
exactly, yeah.
1, you could definitely see
Well,
how that could be applied there as well.
But Frank was a character in the game who wasn't alive, and there must be so many characters in the Last of Us Part 2 who weren't alive that were just in the kind of tidbits that you picked up and the
Yeah.
story arcs that you picked up, like the pieces of paper. Like there's parts in that game where I remember, you read a piece of paper, it's talking about how they've left some medicine in a safe, and you've got to like get the code to open the safe. You can imagine them kind of doing a bit of a backstory to figure out, oh, well, why did they put the medicine in the safe? Were raiders coming to get it? Was this like the right place to put it? Or maybe they just ignore that and they go down different story routes and introduce entirely new characters that were never in the game that make sense in the Last of Us TV universe.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I think no matter how you slice it, like you said, Steve, we'll keep the conversation about the show overall short because we are going to do a spoiler-centric episode, and I'd like to talk about our theories for season 2 and 3 and beyond and everything. But I think given how well executed season 1 has been, and how I think faithfully they've adapted the things that were important to adapt faithfully, and how well they took advantage of deviating where deviating would be interesting or add a new layer to things. So I'm confident in whatever they want to do moving forward, as long as it's the same creative team at the helm. Then yeah, if it's 3 seasons, if it's 4, whatever, like, tell me the story you want to tell. They've been doing a great job of it so far.
Yeah, agreed.
I am looking forward to playing Last of Us Part 1 on PC at the end of this month.
Yeah.
Because I haven't been keeping up with the show because I wanted to watch it in one big chunk. Would you guys recommend I play through the game before I watch the show, or should I catch up on the show now and then play the game? Like, what would you recommend for me?
It's hard for me to say as somebody who's only ever done one and then the other, right? Like I can only speak to my experience. But I think the show is good enough to enjoy removed from the context of the game and vice versa. So I don't necessarily think there will be a bad way for you to go about it. But I think personally, I err on the side of suggesting you start with the source material and then watch the adaptation, because I think you'll be able to appreciate more about what's being adapted rather than the other way around. It'll kind of just be like, oh, this is what's different in the game. Oh, this is what's, you know what I mean? But I don't know. I think either way is fine, right? They're both good pieces independent of one another, but
Yeah, having said that, I do think the ending of the game will be more impactful if you don't know. And if you will know if you watch the TV series. And like it had such a profound impact on me when I first played that back in 2013, I think the PS4 version came out.
Mm-hmm.
And like, I really think you should kind of go in and play the game first if you're really interested in the game, and then come back around to the TV series. But
that's a good
I'm
point.
really interested in playing the game again now. And I wasn't even considering picking up The Last of Us Part 1 because I was just like, oh, well, the TV show is going to scratch that itch. No, the TV show's made an even bigger itch for me to want to scratch. And like having now finished it, I'm hungry for more Last of Us. The next season's probably going to be 2025 by the looks of it. And so I've got 2 years potentially of no Last of Us. So at some point this year, I'm probably going to end up picking up The Last of Us Part 1 and playing it. I'm probably going to end up playing it on PS5 though, I think.
Yeah, I'm thinking the same thing for sure. I will say, definitely play part 2 before watching season 2. Because I think that game would suffer even more from you knowing some of the twists and turns.
Okay. I think there are
That
things
game
I
is
know because
long.
people just don't like keeping things to themselves online. Even
Well,
the
that
show,
game got
like,
ruined before it came out because
yeah, that's
Naughty
true.
Dog got hacked and they found
Yeah.
the
That's
test
true.
footage on the server.
Yeah, but you got to be good at dodging stuff. I was able to preserve most of the important moments in that game for myself just by muting words when you need to, right? So play your cards if you can that way, because I think that game's worth going into fresh.
Duly noted.
All right, so we got some more stuff on the block for you in just a second here, but let me remind you that this episode of the FlipScreen Games Podcast is brought to you by our Patreon producers for the month of March. They are, of course, Arnold J. Rimmer, Christopher Valenz, Earth Visitor, Gabriel Hasselmeyer, a.k.a. Asobi, Wakahula Snackago, and Ty the Dude. Thank you all so much for your support over on patreon.com/FlipScreenGames. Y'all are the realest of the real, and we greatly appreciate your support of this and all of our sister shows. If you want to go become a Patreon producer just like they did and get your name read on the air with a bunch of other cool perks and goodies, you can head over to FlipScreen.Games. That's our website where you will find links to our Patreon. You can find ways to write into the show, come join our Discord. However you choose to get involved, we thank you for tuning into this week's show of the FlipScreen Games Podcast. So let's jump into it. Resident Evil 4 demo impressions are starting to leak out. The game is out and playable now. Or I should say the demo is out and playable now. Of course, the game will be out properly. Is it next week or the week after? It's the 24th,
It's next
right?
Friday, the 24th. Yeah.
Yeah. So right around the corner. Definitely one I think a lot of folks have been looking forward to. By many people's estimation, the best Resident Evil, or at least one of the best Resident Evils. I know that's a controversial take on this podcast.
Steve's face.
Steve's over here fuming because he is, of course, a purist. But yeah,
because it should have been Code Veronica, and I'm still really fucking mad about it because we haven't finished the Umbrella story. And do you know what? They do that same bullshit at the beginning of this demo that they did at the beginning of Resident Evil 4, where it's just like, here's a fucking 3 paragraphs of text telling me what happened at the end of Resident Evil 3. And now all of a sudden Leon now works for some fucking special corporation and he's going to find the president's daughter. And it's just like, okay. But
Why did
there's
I
a
think
whole
you
other
were a
story
Resident
that
Evil
happened
4
with
fan?
Code Veronica. For me, Resident Evil was always zombies and Umbrella and like evil corporations, and that's what it was.
I remember.
And Resident Evil 4 made it like a shooter. It wasn't really survival horror.
that's when it became an action game.
You
and
weren't a fan. I remember now.
No.
Okay.
No, I'm
right.
not. I'm not a fan of the original.
Right. So, not to spoil your opinion, but earlier you said you weren't 100% sure you were picking this game up on launch now because of the demo, right?
Yeah.
I was in my head. It's because you were disappointed with the demo because I thought you were a big fan of Resident Evil 4, but you're not a fan of Resident Evil 4. Okay.
No, and the demo feels like Resident Evil 4, which is
Okay.
great news if you love Resident Evil 4, because the demo feels like Resident Evil 4, even though you can walk and shoot. And I thought that was going to be enough for me. It's not enough for me. It still feels like Resident Evil 4,
All right.
and it's not a game I enjoy. So I was a bit disappointed, to be honest. But it feels like if I'm going to go play this type of game, I should finish Resident Evil Village, which, by my book, is a much better Resident Evil game than Resident Evil 4. It's got the action elements, but it's also got actual scares in it, which in this is just some like, guys with pitchforks coming at you, or a chainsaw with a bag on his head, and it's like, okay, fair enough. But I would, for me, much rather play a survival horror game, and it felt like Resident Evil got lost from Resident Evil 4, 5, and 6. They kind of lost their way for me, and 7 and Village have really kind of got them back on track, and I'm really looking forward to seeing where that story kind of concludes with the Winters DLC.
There's very much like distinct eras, aren't there, of Resident Evil?
There's distinct eras, yeah.
Yeah, for
Resident
sure.
Evil 1, 2, 3, and Code Veronica. That's like the Umbrella era. You can add in like the offshoot Resident Evil Survivor in there, and this and Code Veronica X as well. But that's where like Umbrella ended, and like you find out the Umbrella corporations ended and been dissolved in a paragraph of text, and that's it. That's the link to the previous games, is that we've got Leon and he was in the last game, remember him? And that's it. That's like the limits of the
Yeah.
link to the previous Resident Evil
Okay.
games. They don't tie together at all. It feels like a totally different genre of game, and it's only because it's got the same character that they couldn't even say it's in the same franchise.
All right, fair enough. So let's talk about Resident Evil 4 overall. Let's talk about the demo. Did we all
Yes,
play the demo?
No, I didn't
I
play it.
did.
Okay,
You
so
two go off.
just
That's
me
fine.
and you. So where did you play it, Steve?
I initially played it on Steam Deck, and
Okay.
then decided that 30 frames per second was not quite enough for me for an action
Yeah.
game. So I installed it on my Xbox, and I played
Okay.
the majority of it on my Xbox at 60 FPS.
The majority is you didn't finish it, or
Oh, I got killed by the chainsaw guy, and I was
yeah.
like, I'm kind of done with this
Okay.
now. I don't need to take him down.
I played it on PS5, PC, and Steam Deck.
Look at this guy doing his homework.
We said we were doing it. I initially played it on PS5 because I happened to be sat in front of the PS5 at the time, and I got killed by the chainsaw dude. And because I've never played Resident Evil. You know, played 7 was my first, and then I played 2, then 3, then Village. So I've only sort of
And
the
where
only ones I
where
played.
where is like on your scope for like people that don't know, like what in your book is the best Resident Evil of the ones you played?
I think it's got to be Village at the top, then 2, then 7, then 3.
Dude,
Okay, you know what? I could
wow.
probably be there with you, but I would probably swap and do RE2 Remake as
Oh, I know
number
you like
one,
2. I know you like
then
2.
Village. I think Resident Evil 2 is the best Resident Evil game.
Yeah.
It like defined that genre for me, and the replayability of like I play as Leon A and Claire B, and there's like
Yeah,
two distinct stories. It's just, and they like they're interweaving stories that kind of come together. It's so fucking cool to me.
that for me is why I think I prefer Village, because Village is like one big game that's separated into different sections. You're sort of moving around these spaces, whereas 2 very much feels like, you know, you do it once and then you do it again and then you do it again and then you do it again, and that's fine. It's very good, and I'm not saying that the game's not very good, but I feel like Village for me feels more like, you know, one cohesive world, and you're, you know, moving around it and you're sort of chopping through it and visiting other areas and stuff like
Yeah,
that.
I
Whereas
think Village
yeah,
feels like more modern game design. It's got like
yeah,
an open world, like overworld aspect to it, where you can choose which order the bosses you want to do them in, right? Well, to a certain point. Um, like I defeated the giant baby, I think was the last thing I did. And then 2 is very linear, but I like the linear aspect to it. I like linear games. Resident Evil 4 is that. It's pretty linear, and it
yeah. I
will
mean,
kind
I
of take you through the world.
I think Village is actually quite linear. I don't think there is much in the way of like order choosing. I think you very much do have to go here, then you get the key, then you go here, this, that, and the other. As far as I know. Um, yeah. I think it's yeah.
I think you're right. And what's weird about Village is that the monsters remain dead. They
Yeah,
don't come back. They don't
yeah.
respawn like they do in 2. And that was
I
always
didn't
a
think it was at
thing.
all.
That was always a thing in like Resident Evil games, is the zombies just come back to life. They're there again.
Yeah,
Tough shit.
yeah.
They're,
I do think
you
it
know,
is cool though because it
persistent.
feels more like a persistent world. You know.
And I think
I
4's like that. 4,
yeah.
you kill them, they're gone. That's
I
it.
think for yeah.
I
So
think that
like
makes sense, right? Again, that's like the more action oriented type thing
Yeah.
where it's like you're mowing
yeah.
down groups of enemies rather than, you know.
Oh, and it really is groups. It's mobs of enemies that just come
Yeah.
at you over and over again. And it's like,
So this
why?
is
Where would all the you people live? There's like 2
yeah.
shacks in this area. How are there
This
so
is
many
what I
people?
was gonna say. Like the you know, after only having played those games, going into 4 and sort of like when I first made, you know, going through the first area, I was like, okay, kill a zombie, okay, kill 2 dudes, okay, cool. And now I'm at the well, they're not even zombies, they're just dudes at the time. And then you get into
Well,
the
there's no zombies in this game, and
all right, fine.
that's a point of contention for me.
And then you go into the village, or like, you know, the village at the very beginning, and then there's like, you know, I saw they set a dude on fire, and I was like, oh, that's gnarly. So I went and like just started shooting. You know, it's like 3 guys there, and then it was just
Oh,
like
big mistake. You gotta
fight
go
them
around
off.
the side, get the
Oh, I
herb,
did that after.
smash
Yeah,
the
yeah, yeah.
boxes with
Don't
the
worry, I've
yellow
done it
cross on
now.
it for some reason.
And I was yeah, yellow is a pretty big Resident Evil thing, right? Of yellow means break.
Didn't used to.
Oh,
But
okay, well,
yeah.
the ones that I played didn't do it.
Resident Evil 4 was where it really happened, because like prior to that, you didn't really have that level of fidelity in the world. It was just
Yeah,
like, oh, these are like pre-rendered backgrounds, and that's clearly a plant pot that I can pick
Yeah,
up.
yeah. Okay. But I was shocked when all of a sudden there's like 10 guys after me, and then the and I just felt weak. Like I
Yeah.
guess you do feel weak in
You
these
just got to run away from them. You
Yeah.
shouldn't. It says, but the thing is, like the prompt is clear them down or like
Fight them off, I think it
fight
says.
them off.
Yeah.
You got to run away, shoot a few of them down, and then the
Yeah,
chainsaw
because
guy
like
come through.
my knife broke very quickly. I was parrying all these guys, and I was just like, "Yeah, no, not today, not today." And
The
like you do a couple
parrying
of stabs
thing's
and a couple
so
of
annoying.
parrying.
It's like I hate it. Oh god.
I think
But yeah,
there was some interesting interactions in it. I don't know if they're from the original, or if they're just like new things, but like, a guy went to hit me with an axe, and I parried it on a roof, and he then fell off the roof, and I was like, "Oh, that was kind of cool." And then like,
I think they're pretty new. But the whole parrying mechanic, you shoot them in the head, and
mhm.
yet that's not enough to kill them. I've then got to stab them with a knife,
Or kick
or
them,
kick
or
them,
yeah, yeah.
or do
I
something like with the right trigger, and it's just really strange to me.
Yeah, it does feel very much like I'm sort of constantly running away from like a mob, and it took me maybe 4 or 5 attempts. It took me like I did it twice on PS5, didn't beat it. Once on Steam Deck, died at the chainsaw guy. Okay, cool. Then I went on PC as well. Then I did it again on PC like 3 more times today, and I finally got it today on the end. And what saved it for me is I happened to just come across the shotgun, and I was like, "Oh, there's a shotgun here, cool." And I got the shotgun, and I was able to sort of like kill some dudes. But it does feel like a completely different game. You are right. Like it doesn't feel like I'm moving through taking people out. It's like, oh, I've got to just run away and survive. And then when the bell rang, I was like, oh, okay. So I don't know if I had to like kill enough of them or do enough damage to the chainsaw dude, or like what the
Steve,
actual goal was.
so I don't mean to cut you off, Max, but I'm watching some gameplay of this intro. I'm watching Leon fight a zombie. What do you mean there's no zombies? He
It's not a
killed
zombie.
a guy just came back to life and attacked him, and he's dead.
It is not a zombie.
He's probably got something in his head. I can't remember what it is.
You
but
mean the old dude that then comes down the stairs and he's like, "What
No,
the fuck?"
no, no, it's just some
as
guy.
if like Leon's never seen someone reanimate before.
No, it was he's just fighting a guy in a field, with one of the pitchfork men. He kills him. He got back up. His neck was all
Oh
broken.
no, he's not dead. He's not dead. They're just like fucking. For some reason, they've got unlimited health until you stab them. The stab's the thing that gets them. I don't know why some of the enemies are like it. It's very weird.
Steve hates this game, man.
He does, I know.
I
You can
really
tell.
don't like
You
Resident
can
Evil 4.
really tell.
I was so excited.
That's such an
for it. I
unpopular
really
opinion too. It's so
thought,
funny.
I know it is. I know it is. And I really thought Resident Evil 4 Remake was gonna be the one. It's gonna hook me in finally, because I thought my hang up was I can't run and shoot at the same time, and this feels weird and doesn't feel modern. And then there's like the Wii version with the weird shitty motion controls that no one actually likes. And like,
Whoa! I will not hear any negative said about motion
That's what I'm
control.
saying. This guy's just talking smack. He's out here talking smack.
I will
fuck off. No
not
one.
hear.
Okay, yeah, no, because we all loved pointing a remote control at the screen
I
to shoot.
loved playing Metroid Prime Trilogy on the Wii because of the pointing and because of that kind of shooting. I loved that.
Okay, did you play Metroid Prime Remastered that way?
No,
Well, why not?
Less
It's
convenient.
crap.
It's
It's a
less
terrible
convenient.
experience. Exactly, it's inconvenient. No one likes it. It's rubbish.
But when it was
So-
the only option, I enjoyed it.
Yeah, when it's the only
When I
option,
had no
you're forced into the shittest control scheme.
And I enjoyed
Yeah,
it,
it's
and I had
okay.
nothing against it.
No, but aside from my hatred for the gameplay, which can't be changed, and if you like Resident Evil 4, you're gonna love Remake. I thought the demo was great. Like, it's visually phenomenal. It's got a really cool like mode that it once asked me. It was on my second run through. It was like, "Do you want to play Mad Chainsaw mode?" It's like, won't be in the final game. It's like super difficult, and I was like, "No, I'm terrible.
Yeah,
I don't
that's
want to play
the-
on crazy chainsaw mode."
That's like a random thing that there's no way to really unlock it. You just have to keep starting a new game and hoping it comes up. Yeah, there's no way. The fact that it took me like 6 tries in total, whatever it was, to actually beat the thing on the normal difficulty, there's no chance you're gonna get me playing that. But yeah, you are right. It does look gorgeous. Like, I feel like the final game's probably gonna look better, especially like on considering how the game runs on Steam Deck. And I can only, for some reason, on my TV, I can only get
Yeah.
it to run 1080p on my TV, but I could get it 1440p on this screen. I've got a 4K TV, 1440p monitor. It was 1440p here, only 1080p there. There's obviously some,
Is your
just some weird
Did
stuff
you go
going
into
on.
the settings? And well,
Yeah,
we'll
yeah,
talk
yeah.
about that on the Steam Deck podcast maybe.
Yeah,
But
yeah, yeah.
but yeah, there was some real issues at launch, because I downloaded this pre-Proton hotfix, and the most I could get was 10 frames per second.
yeah, sure.
Then they did
Ooh. Yikes.
They did a Proton hotfix, and I could get up to about 40 FPS on low settings, but I went in and tweaked a bunch of the graphics to make it look decent. I turned off fidelity super resolution and just did TAA and stuff like that. Made it look nice. I appreciate the fact that there's interlaced rendering, which is basically checkerboard rendering, so you can eke a bit more performance out if you want to. That's an option in there, which is really cool. Seems like a really good PC version. And I think that's what we've come to expect from Resident Evil. And the RE engine is phenomenal. And I really hope they never, ever go to Unreal, because I don't want to lose the RE engine. I know we spoke about the loss of engines last week, Pete, and the RE engine
I don't think
is
it's
one
going anywhere. I mean, it seems to be yeah, definitely. And like, I think it's like, it handles lighting so well. Like, and like, obviously, grain of salt. I'm not a game developer. I don't work there. It seems like it's easy to work with. They've been like, this is what, the third game with it they've put out in
7, Resident Evil 2 remake, Resident Evil 3 remake, Village, and now this one.
So 5.
Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak.
Oh, is that the RE engine as
They're
well?
both RE engine. Yeah,
Really?
It's
Wow.
not, because it's not the Resident Evil engine. It's the Reach for the Moon engine. So it's not just Resident Evil games. It's just a Capcom engine.
Well, either way, right? I think that proves the point, right? Like, of how, I mean, not only does it look and feel great, it seems like it's pretty developer friendly if they're able to like churn out games that look and feel this hot this quickly.
Games on Resident Evil, games on the RE engine. I said Resident Evil engine. I didn't mean it. Devil May Cry 5. So Resident Evil 7, Resident Evil 2, Devil May Cry 5, RE3, Devil May Cry 5 again, Ghosts and Goblins, Capcom Arcade Stadium, Monster Hunter Rise, Resident Evil Village, Capcom Arcade Second Stadium, Resident Evil Rebirth, Resident Evil 4, Street Fighter 6, Exo Primal, Pragmata, whatever that's going to be, and then Dragon's Dogma 2. They're all, so anything from Resident Evil onwards is coming out this year or later. So since 2017, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11
Wow, Street Fighter 6 on it. That's impressive.
That is cute. That's huge.
Yeah, I mean, it scales then from like a 2D engine for Capcom Arcade Stadium and Ghosts and Goblins all the way up to something like Resident Evil or even like a Street Fighter. It's like, it's really a diverse engine. But you're right, Pete, the lighting in it's phenomenal. It's got ray tracing options on Series X and PS5 is just on. On PC, there's a ray tracing option you can turn on and off. And it says it's still under development, so I can imagine, you're right, Max, it's probably going to look and play even better. I can imagine Steam's probably working on some more Valve or Proton hotfixes.
I think it has to. I'm disappointed with how it's performed on Steam Deck, because of how just perfect out the box Village was and how Resident Evil 3 was the exact same. I just loaded it and it looked great. I didn't have to tweak anything.
Yeah.
I've really had to spend a lot of time tweaking. I've had to change my version. I've had to do all this stuff just to get it running, looking.
The changing of the version they have fixed now. So if you're on preview and you download the Chainsaw demo, it will automatically default to Proton hotfix. That they've done that server side, but it is a pain, and it's just one of those things, right? You're playing a game that's designed for Windows on a Linux handheld, and Proton does its job as much as it can, but Valve won't have tested the game ahead of time. It's not a demo anyway. I can imagine they've been working on the main game, and we're kind of anticipating getting the Proton stuff ready for that.
Yeah.
But it was nice that within an hour of the demo being up, they patched it with a hotfix and pumped that out. It's pretty phenomenal.
So is this a game that we're going to pick up on launch or not on launch? What do you think?
I'm not. No way.
No. Pete, you interested at all?
I am. It's just like, it's tough for me because I think I might like RE4 better. Because I really enjoyed the time I've put into RE2 remake, but it's a horror game and I don't like horror games, right? Like it inherently is something where, like, I like to play video games to relax, and I find playing horror games inherently not relaxing, right? The whole point of them is to induce anxiety. And I remember when I was playing RE2 remake the first time, famously, I stopped playing it because a global pandemic kicked off, and I was like, this isn't the vibe. Like, this is reinforcing something that I'm already anxious about. You
played 2 Last of Us games during the pandemic.
I did.
It's literally a game about a pandemic rather than like a viral outbreak confined to a single city.
Yeah, you're right. You're not wrong. but that's the thing, right? Those are not horror games. So like,
no, they're action games, which is what this is like. Yeah.
And so I think I even if it's not a better game, like story-wise or any of that, like I could see myself vibing with the gameplay better in this game because I think the things that stress me out about RE2 Remake are like not on display here. But you know, I don't know. Like I keep trying to become a Resident Evil guy, and I'm just not. You know?
No, it's
Play
okay if
Village.
you're not. Like, if you don't like horror, it's fine. But I would say you are missing out on some phenomenal games. Like, I do think, though,
Yeah.
for me, the more horror-centric ones are what I'm looking for. And I actually think Seven and Village do such a good job of combining the elements of those early Resident Evil games, the actual horror, the tension, the survival horror elements, the scare factor that you got with action. Because even the chainsaw guy in Resident Evil in this demo, right? He's not really scary. It's just like you're maybe you get a sense and a feeling of stress and being overwhelmed, but it's not like holy shit, like that was actually a scary moment. And I don't really remember getting any of those moments from Resident Evil 4. But you definitely get those from the earlier games, and I've definitely had those moments in Resident Evil Village as I'm kind of in the middle of a playthrough for that one. I think for me, I'm probably going to finish Village and the Winters DLC, and then if I'm in a Resident Evil mood, I'll pick up 4 Remake when it goes on sale. But if I'm going to play a zombie game, I'll play The Last of Us, which
Sure.
are also not zombies.
Yeah, I think that's where I'm at with it. I think if it comes to Game Pass and I can try it, then I will. But I think every other time I've tried in the last several years to jump into a Resident Evil, it ends up just, even though I'm enjoying it, I'm like, I'm not in the mood for this, you know?
Yeah.
Do you like horror movies? I've recently got into the Scream series because I went to see Scream 5 and 6 double bill. And those aren't scary at all, but I
Yeah.
find them absolutely hilarious. And I feel like maybe you need to like laugh at the horror that's happening
and
in
that's the
Resident
thing
Evil.
it's different, right? Because like I do like horror movies. I don't love horror movies. Like I wouldn't say I'm like an aficionado, but I've seen very many of them, and I've enjoyed a good percentage, right? I definitely would say that I'm open to horror films for sure, or even in other mediums, whatever. But with games, I think it's just like it's too visceral because there is that feeling of like it's happening to me, not a character that I'm watching on the screen, right? Where it's like I'm the one running away and I'm fumbling and I'm so susceptible to that. Like even when we were playing RE2 Remake, right? Like I get that like I'm trying to aim the gun and I'm freaking out and then and it's like it's good content. I don't mind doing it in that context because it is like okay, I'm spooked or whatever, but like we're here, we're laughing, like, it's whatever. When I'm just like doing it alone, like quote unquote for fun, it's like just like the old heart rate is going, it's like I'm gonna go I don't know about all this. It's like I either wanna like because even something like Elden Ring, where like there or like whatever Bloodborne, any of those kinds of games where like there'll be you're fighting this
Elden
horrific
Ring,
terrifying monster, but it's like but like I can fuck him up, right? Like if I do the thing right, I'll win.
Kind of vibe. I think that's the kind of vibe I get with Resident Evil 4. It feels more like an Elden Ring style game where it's just like I've got that sense of stress that this like I'm trying to defeat this boss, so there's all these swarms of enemies coming towards me, and I'm like freaking out about that. But it's not like there's a jump scare. There's this tension of is there going to be a zombie around the corner, or I've got Mr. X, or I've got Nemesis chasing me, and it's like you lose that sense, I think, of tension and anxiety, and just like hearing that music or hearing those footsteps.
Yeah, the goal is
And
different.
just
Like
being like shit.
one wants you to feel weak, and one wants you to feel powerful.
Oh, you won't feel powerful in 4 Remake. You'll feel like I'm running out of bullets. I'm stressed out that there's 1,000 people chasing me. Where the fuck is a gun that's not a crappy little handgun with like 10 bullets in it? Where like what am I meant to do? Like you'll have people with pitchforks stabbing you in the chest.
Yeah, see, I'm not into
like
that. I don't know.
You won't feel like a hero. You'll get the same sense that you get in The Last of Us, where the games are designed right and perfectly crafted to give you just the resources you need at that time,
Yeah.
that you always have a sense of anxiety of, I'm going into this huge battle, but I've only got 10 bullets. And it's just like, well, it's okay, because when you run out of bullets, some more spawn somewhere on the map and you just got to run around and find them. Or I've hardly got any health. Oh, here's a green herb. And the designers know that that's the sense that you're going to get from it.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's like, don't get me wrong. I get it. I get why people like it. It's just like, not usually for me. All right, so let's jump into some Xbox news. This first one is just like, we've been talking a lot about the kind of behind the scenes of the attempted acquisition of Activision Blizzard by Xbox, and I think the fun thing about these legal cases, even though like the stories go on forever, is just how many juicy little tidbits you get that would never have ever surfaced otherwise, and I think this kind of falls in that camp. Where Activision Blizzard COO Lulu Chang, she posted about Sony's kind of just refusal to get in line and let this go through, while Nintendo and other people have been willing to sign these long-term agreements with Xbox and kind of are deciding that they don't see this as a problem, right? Obviously, Sony's stance on this has been, I think, pretty clear from the beginning, right? The goal isn't to agree to something, it's to stop it and to draw it out and make it as, tedious and as annoying as possible. And this feels like the latest update on that side of things, right? So over on Twitter, Lulu said, Microsoft offered Sony the dominant, and this is a parenthetical, the dominant console leader for well over a decade with 80% market share, a 10-year agreement on far better terms than Sony would ever get from us. And then we've also offered Sony guaranteed long-term access to Call of Duty, but they keep refusing. Why? And then her follow-up is the CEO of Sony Interactive Entertainment answered that question in Brussels. In his words, I don't want a new Call of Duty deal. I just want to block your merger.
and there's got to be truth in this, right?
Yeah.
The COO of Activision Blizzard is not going to come out and say something potentially defamatory about Jim Ryan. She's just not. So I 100% believe that conversation happened.
Absolutely. It'd be libel otherwise.
And it really goes to show, like, they just, I think all of their arguments are just straw man arguments. Like, this was in response to Tom Warren over at The Verge, who pulled out a segment from the CMA in the UK, the Competitions and Markets Authority. And Sony's response was that Microsoft could release a buggy version of Call of Duty on PlayStation on purpose, which will make gamers lose confidence in PlayStation as a go-to venue to play Call of Duty. And that is just such a absolute baloney argument, because I feel like gamers, even now, if you put out a buggy game, they're not like, oh wow, it's buggy on PlayStation, that must be Sony's fault that EA's released this game and it doesn't run very well. It's like, no, they go on Twitter and they're like, at EA, your game sucks, like, please release a fix. It's like, guess what they're going to be doing in this response? It'll be at Microsoft, at Xbox, please release a good version of Call of Duty on PlayStation. It's not going to go, oh, I'm going to go buy an Xbox then because I've completely lost faith in PlayStation.
Yeah, it all just seems like grasping at straws, and everything everything Sony has said has felt like that in a lot of ways, and this just sort of like, this quote kind of confirms that. What we've been saying a lot is that, like, Sony are doing anything, they're saying anything, and they are, because they don't want it to go through.
Yeah, and it's like, it makes sense though too, right? Because I also think it's funny, like, where people are trying to like paint them as being villainous, right? It's like, even in Lulu's tweet, right? She's like, why? It's like, I mean, the answer is obvious, right? It's like, they don't want to give their direct competitor an edge, no matter how much Microsoft says that they are not direct competitors. They absolutely are, right? Or at least Sony thinks of them that way, because they're the only other console that's competing for your living room that has access to the same library that they do, right? Like, obviously, Nintendo is going to Nintendo. The Switch is a hybrid device. It exists in the living room, but like, you're not going
At
to
the
play Call of
moment,
Duty,
yeah.
right?
Well,
Like,
not yet, but they've got a 10-year deal now with Nintendo.
they
So
do.
on the next Nintendo console, you will be going to play Call of Duty there, and you might not be going to play it with Sony because they're refusing to sign a deal. And it really feels like this deal's probably on the cusp of going through at this point. Like the EU seems to have settled down, the FTC seems to have settled down, the CMA's making its final deliberations and either approving or rejecting in April. It seems like they're probably going to approve it, and they're happy with the concessions that Microsoft made with the deal that they've signed with not only Nintendo but also Nvidia,
Mhm.
and that kind of alleviates and assuages some of the concerns that they had around the cloud gaming stuff. I kind of feel like Sony's going to get served some just desserts at some point, where it's going to be like, okay, we're not going to give you Call of Duty and another deal in 4 years' time, because guess what? We don't have to anymore because we've signed a deal with another competitor, which is Nintendo, and you just have to suck it up.
They also
Because,
offered it to Steam, right? Like, they,
yeah,
you know, it's they're clearly showing that, like, hey, this is our good faith effort, right? Like, we're trying. They're not playing ball with us, you know,
Mhm.
which I think is, you know, it's interesting, right? Because I definitely think it's this is Sony doing the thing that they well too often do, where they do something that makes business sense, and then they get painted as like, oh, like they're the bad guy in this situation, and it's like, I mean, you know,
Well, yeah, remember the $70 games at launch, and then it was like the nickel and diming to pay for an upgrade to the PS5 version if you already had the PS4 version, and well, Xbox did it for free. And then you had all of these different tiers of PlayStation Plus where it was simple over on the Xbox side, and you paid for Game Pass and you got Game Pass. Like, it really feels all the time like they're penny pinching and like scraping the barrel and like trying to get their fans and their customers to pay more for just like the exact same stuff in some cases. And fair enough, inflation's risen. We've seen from Microsoft that now they've got to raise prices as well. And maybe it did make sense all along for that $70 stuff to happen. But if Sony lose Call of Duty at the hands of Jim Ryan just wanting to block a deal maliciously, and they cannot make an agreement anymore, I don't think he's going to be very long at
no, I
Sony.
mean, I don't know how secure his position was anyway. But yeah, I think you're probably right about that. But again, right, like I think even the way that you just put that, though, I think is interesting to me. The idea that it's like, oh, it's malicious. It's like, I mean, it's business, right? Like, that's what it is. Like, it's not about making friends, right? Like, it's like they don't want Xbox to own one of the biggest selling games on their platform. They don't want to pay them a cut. They don't want to have their success tied directly to their competitors' success. This is the same reason I said years ago that you would never see Game Pass on PlayStation, right? Because it's like, no, fucking course not. And it's like, yeah, like maybe Nintendo agrees to a deal like this because what does Nintendo care? Right? Like they don't look at the other two as direct competitors in that way either. And I think it's easy for Xbox and Nintendo to be like, oh yeah, we serve different niches, so we can hold hands and say it's fine. Doesn't matter. It doesn't affect us. Call of Duty wasn't a big game on Nintendo anyway. If they did just agree to 10 years and it does sell, then great. That's a boon for Nintendo. It wouldn't have been there anyway, right? Who cares, right? Like obviously Sony is the odd company out in this conversation because they stand the most to lose by a lot, and I don't think it's unreasonable that they're like, no, right? Like we're gonna do everything we can to stop it because like, hey, they came pretty close. Right? Like the CMA raised a legitimate concern that it wasn't going to happen.
I don't think that was because of Call of Duty. That was because of the cloud stuff. The CMA's big holdup was the cloud stuff. And I really think Stadia dying harmed them. But Nvidia and the deal with Nvidia to bring Call of Duty to the cloud on a competing cloud platform.
And they also offered
really
that to Sony.
Saved the deal. And yes, they did also offer it to Sony, which Phil Spencer openly said multiple times if they want a cloud version, we'll give them a cloud version, but it's going to be native Call of Duty on their platform if that's what they want. And they've offered it time and time again, and it seems like time and time again they've just said no. And now we know why, because they want to block the merger.
Well, of course. Right? Like we knew that. They wouldn't have been putting all the effort into it that they would to
for
hear
those
it.
words to actively come out of Jim Ryan's mouth to the COO of Activision Blizzard is like a totally other thing than reading between the lines and clearly figuring out that they want to block the merger.
I think when you say, Pete, that like it's business and it's like it's fine. Like, yeah, I agree with that. Like, obviously they want to do it, but they've sort of spent a lot of this time not specifically saying that. They've been saying things like, "Oh, oh, they want to make us like Nintendo, or they want to do this, that, and the other. They're trying to keep these things away from blah blah," which very much seems like they have been saying, um, almost. They've been saying, it's been very much about Call of Duty. It's been very much about keeping it fair for their players. But now to outright say it now after all this
Yeah.
time, I sort of like shows that maybe they have been playing it a bit disingenuously beforehand.
But I guess it's like disingenuous by what metric? Because we've talked about this a lot, and it's like I think the reality is that like this acquisition is good for Xbox and it's good for Xbox players or people that have Game Pass. It's not good for the industry. I've been saying that since the beginning. It was bad that Xbox bought Bethesda. That was bad for the industry. This is also bad for the industry. It's good for consumers if they buy from Xbox, right? And like the attitude from Sony being like, oh, like that's what they want. That is what Xbox wants, right? Xbox can say until they're blue in the face that that's not their goal. But if they could flip a switch and make them the number one console in the game and make Sony irrelevant or far less relevant, they would absolutely do that, right? Like, and again, I'm not saying like, oh, it's business, like in terms of like, so whatever, it's fine, but it's just like the idea that like Xbox are good guys, I think is so dangerous. And I've said this forever. This is and like I generally speaking, right? I think Phil Spencer has been a good leader at Xbox. I think he's made a lot of decisions that have been really healthy for the brand and that have benefited Xbox players. And that's his job, right? But at the end of the day, like there are so many companies now that used to make multi-platform games that are now going to be exclusive to this ecosystem. That is what Xbox is trying to do. They're trying to make Xbox more relevant across the board. And is Game Pass part of that strategy? Yes. Is PC part of that strategy? Yes. But the fact that they just keep saying like, oh, well, they're not our competitors because we're everywhere and we're in the cloud and all we want is for everyone to be able to game wherever they want. That's not what they want. What they want is everyone to be able to game wherever they want as long as we get a cut. And that's like,
fair.
And that is just as much a profit-motivated, business-motivated point of view, right? And the idea that they are somehow the good guys in this scenario and PlayStation are the bad guys, there are no good guys or bad guys. There are companies competing for your dollar, and none of them are your friend, and all of them will do what will improve their bottom line at your expense as soon as you give them the opportunity to, right? We gave Sony all the shit in the world for raising prices. Nintendo's charging us $70 for Tears of the Kingdom on a console that's, 6 years old. So...
Yes.
And guess why? Because they can, and we're going to pay for it. And it's the same thing with this, right? Xbox might agree right now. Oh, yeah, 10-year deal, whatever. What happens if Call of Duty stays that relevant for 10 years, and then once the 11th year rolls around, they're like, okay, it's exclusive now, right? Like, that's the problem with some of this stuff is like, we were also like,
I really hope in 11 years that Call of Duty is not relevant anymore.
Well, I mean, we'll see. But
we've given up on war games and moved on to something.
I'm just saying, I remember when the conversation on this podcast was, well, surely they won't make Starfield exclusive. Why would you leave all that money on the table? Don't you want there's so many players on PlayStation. Right, okay, and what happened? What happens when Elder Scrolls is an exclusive? What happens when Fallout's an exclusive?
Oh, Elder Scrolls is definitely going to be exclusive. But I think all of the games as a service stuff is going to carry on being multi-platform. It's interesting what you said about that, though, because Lulu did a follow-up interview with Stephen Totillo over at Axios Gaming, and she told him that we're going to do more threads like that. She said, if there are things that we think people should know about, we should just go ahead and say it out loud. And she acknowledged there was some internal worry about the thread. Specifically over whether it was going to make Sony angry. And she said, we're a partner to them. Were they worried about pissing us off when they tried to kill a really good deal that our employees wanted and the players wanted? Were they worried about pissing us off when they made all these claims that seemed to be pretty disingenuous? And we didn't take it personally. They're making the case for what's best for their business.
Exactly. Right? And that's the bottom line, is that like, I don't think there's right or wrong or nice or not nice. Like, it's fucking business. And all of these companies are trying to push forward what's going to benefit them the most. And if that means a compromise with a competitor, sure. But that doesn't make them friends. That doesn't make them allies, right? Like, at the end of the day, Xbox wants the best thing for Xbox. And the best thing for Xbox is not the best, is decidedly not the best thing for PlayStation. But you know what? That's it, right? Competition breeds excellence. That's what they say. So hopefully, hopefully Sony has a response to this, when, if and when it goes through, right? And that they find a way to remain competitive because they have to.
Yeah, I think I really like Lulu's style though. She also tagged the FTC and on Twitter and said, "Did you catch last night's episode of The Last of Us? It was incredible. No wonder it's breaking records. It's a true blockbuster, watched by tens of millions."
She's so
If
funny.
you haven't already watched it, you should check it out. And you may be particularly interested in the fact that, and then quote tweeted someone, "The Last of Us HBO continues to prove that it can be the greatest video game TV adaptation ever."
That's so funny. That is so petty. I love it.
Then she goes on to talk about how it's produced by Sony Pictures Television and PlayStation Productions, and that the FTC opposed Microsoft and Activision because it could suppress competition, blah, 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 blah. So, yeah, I think she's really funny. I like her.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Well, as I've said every other time we bring it up, I'm sure we will talk about this again soon. So hope you're still enjoying the dirt as much as I am. All right, so let's close things out on one last Xbox story today. Starfield, as we just talked about a few minutes ago, right? One of the big Xbox exclusives down the line. Of course, the next big Bethesda game studio. As they like to brag, the first new universe from them in over 25 years. So quite a big deal. A game we've all been waiting for a long time.
What was the last new universe from them? Was the Elder Scrolls? That's the only new universe that
only one
Bethesda
they've
Game
done, right?
Studios has ever created, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that's true. But
because they acquired Fallout, so they've only made the Elder Scrolls.
Yeah. But it's the first one. It's the first one in over 25 years.
Well,
The second one.
That's big news. Yeah, that's big news still.
Still a big deal. But of course, the last conversation we got about this game was that that it was going to come out in the first half of this year, right? And now it's been announced that the official release date is September 6th, which, I guess is technically a delay. People have been kind of debating whether or not this is a proper delay or not. Sorry, I just played the Starfield tweet by accident. Apologies for your ears. Yeah, I don't know. I'm just of the opinion with this game already where, like, I'm already excited for it. And, like, if it needs a delay to be, more polished at launch, especially given Bethesda's history of, like, not always having the most stable launches, right?
Well, it's not even just launches. They're just their games even 10 years down the line.
They got jank.
Yeah.
Yeah, like that's
like
part of it.
It's old. It's not a bug. It's a feature kind of thing.
Right, exactly. Yeah, and I for me, I think there's so many unanswered questions about this game, but I don't really want them answered at this point. Like, it's like, just I want the game to come out and I want to see what it is. So I'm of the opinion of, like, take as much time as you need to get it right, and if they need to delay it again, right? Like, that's what I would want. But what was y'all's reaction to this?
I think that people like crying about a delay. I say crying, like, I mean, like, you see the reactionary YouTubers who will put that as soon as the news came out, it was Starfield is delayed, and I don't think that's the headline here. I think the headline is Starfield is finally coming out. You should be excited for it, not Starfield is delayed. Oh God, like the game's delayed again. You guys can't play it for ages or whatever. And I think this is a game that I've not purposely not looked at, and I've never seen any of the gameplay or the trailers for it because I'm interested in seeing what the conversation is around launch compared to things like Skyrim and stuff like that, which I didn't sort of enjoy too much. But I'm very much looking forward to seeing what happens when this game does come out, what the reviews say, what people say about people that actually get a chance to play it. So yeah, I'm cautiously looking out for this one. I just don't think that we should be. I don't think the conversation around it should be that the game is delayed or it's taking too long. That kind of thing.
I mean, I think the game is definitely delayed. It was meant to be out November the 11th. It's almost a 1-year delay since last year. It's pretty damning on Microsoft Studios again that
True.
they've once again had a huge slip past the deadline that they themselves set, that definitive date. They didn't have to be 11/11/2022 when they announced it at E3 last year. Didn't have to happen.
That's a good point.
And yet they did. In fact, I think that was E3 2021, right? And so they really just need to be more realistic with deadlines. I think they should stop announcing them so far ahead and wait until they know and just advertise the game and just do what seemingly every other studio is doing lately, which is just not giving us definitive dates until they know for certain that it's going to happen, because it disappoints fans. I know a lot of people were disappointed that Xbox didn't really have a big game last year because Starfield got pushed. This year they've got several. We've got Redfall, and we've got Starfield, and we've got Forza Motorsport. So we do have some big games coming.
We already had Hi-Fi Rush as well, right? Like, but this time last year they didn't have anything like that really,
which was a surprise. And I want this game to get as much polish as it can. I think the real disappointment is the fact that they just announced a date and just it really slipped. And it makes you wonder, especially with everything that went on with Halo, the fact that games just seem to keep getting pushed back. We don't know anything about the next Hellblade game. Hellblade 2, where's that?
Yeah.
There's just a lot of stuff that just it seems to be pretty damning on the management of those studios, and I don't really know how they go about fixing it.
That I struggle with that characterization, the idea that it's damning, because I think I would actually say it's damning for the marketing. I wouldn't say it's damning for the management. I think it's better to delay a game that's a big, promising game that's not done yet, especially when you saw what happened with Halo Infinite, which I think was an excellent game. It was that
got delayed so many times. That was meant to be a launch title for Series X.
Yeah,
it was on my box.
But so what? Like, because I think like the game, if the game had come out, then it would have reviewed poorly. And when it came out, it reviewed really well. But then guess what? There wasn't enough content to maintain the multiplayer. Like Season 3 just 100%. Finally launched, and now people are getting back into it.
But the multiplayer didn't even come out at launch. We had the campaign, and then the multiplayer had to be delayed, and then split screen multiplayer. I don't even know if it ever came.
No,
I don't think it did. That was a severely mismanaged project at 343. So much so they pretty much cleared house by the sounds of it.
Right. But that's the thing, right? Is like I think the content really was not the problem. Like there are features that didn't come across the line, right? Like we've read about the troubles they ran into with the engine and all that stuff. I definitely think it's fair to say that 343 has a management problem. But I think like the idea that like that is damning for like Microsoft, I don't necessarily agree there, because I think that they're doing.
I think when you take the lineup as a whole, though, I think that's the issue, because they pegged everything on Starfield last year, so much so that they had nothing else. That was the game for 2022. There was no big release. We had Pentiment. That was like the other big title that they had, right? And that's disappointing for people who are looking for hot stuff from first party studios. Sony had a banger year last year. We got Game of the Year contenders. We had Horizon, and we had God of War. Seemingly this year they've got Spider-Man 2, and that's it. But they've got the PSVR 2 as well. And I know that Spider-Man 2 is probably going to be in contention for Game of the Year, because the first one was phenomenal. Yeah. And I just, I think this is good. It moves it out of a hot June release window, if that's where it was going to land, first half of 2023. You have to think that they were probably going to go for June and get as close to that half as they could. For me, though, it's disappointing. It's 1 week away from Baldur's Gate 3, and I don't know which game I play now. And it's probably going to be Starfield, which is a real shame.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're different enough that, like, they'll definitely like.
It could be that one's a palate cleanser, right?
Yeah, but I think it's tough though, right? Because no matter where you go, you're going to end up against something, and it's like I think it made sense to get out of the way of the Breath of the Wild, because I think if Breath of the Wild is as good as, if Tears of the Kingdom is as good as Breath of the Wild, that might invite some unfavorable comparisons if things about this open world are not as satisfying. Whereas if it comes later in the year, I think it has more of an opportunity to kind of set itself apart and have a little bit of a recency bias as well when people are thinking about it, rather than like going through both of them at the same time with a microscope. You saw how that fared for Horizon, right? It just it sucks the oxygen out of the room. So I don't know, this is such an interesting one for me because I'm so excited for this game. I think broadly this is probably, if not my most anticipated game, it's neck and neck, right, with something like Spider-Man 2. But I think the ceiling for this is just so high, right? Like if it does come out and it hits the way that Fallout 3 did as like a revolutionary title at the time, or like Skyrim, or the way we look back on something like New Vegas, like that could really be a generation-defining experience in a game that we like talk about for years and years and years. I hope that it hits that bar, right? Like their last couple at bats have not been on that level, I don't think. I think even Fallout 4, right, which reviewed well at the time, I don't think people look back on it with the same reverence as...
No, it's left like no footprint whatsoever compared to Fallout 3 or New Vegas.
Right.
Just from the friends of mine that have played all of them and that will always play them.
Yeah.
Mate, I'm going back to look at the announcements. I'm looking at Jason Schreier's reporting on it. So last May, they delayed both Redfall and Starfield were meant to come out last year. So they had two games that they were planning to release last year, both from Bethesda, and both got pushed to the first half of 2023. Looks like Redfall's probably going to hit that window, and obviously Starfield isn't. But Jason said last spring, before E3, I spoke to some folks on Starfield who were extremely worried about committing to an 11/11/22 date based on the progress they've made so far. Next Cyberpunk was the term floated.
Yeah.
And then, in June of 2021, he said, as I reported a few weeks ago, the rumors of Starfield releasing in 2021 or early 2022 were always nonsense. They're aiming to hit alpha this summer. Hopefully it's enough time. So I guess it wasn't enough time, that they probably didn't hit alpha in summer and it got pushed back. Maybe they were just being incredibly ambitious with their dates, but I kind of feel like you go with a window rather than a fixed date.
Yeah, I think that's
I'm sure it'll be lessons learned, really.
I hope so, because I think that's really the problem for me with both of these games, right? Is like, I don't think it's a problem that either of these games were delayed. It's that they were promised as like launch games or launch window or whatever, and then like they just keep getting pushed back. And I think they keep giving dates to sell consoles and be like, oh, you got to get one now. It's on sale and it's going to be out this year. And it's like, and then it wasn't, and it doesn't come, right? And like, you're setting an expectation and letting people down rather than just letting the hype build naturally.
But, it's been practice in the industry for a long time, right? You think about one of the reasons people bought a Wii U, and it was for Breath of the Wild, and it was the last game that released on that console.
Yeah. I mean, shoot, we talked about it with Horizon and God of War, right? Like, they definitely announced that those games were going to be ready earlier than they were so that people would be excited, right? Because you want to have this idea that, like, okay, these are the games I'm looking forward to this year. These are the ones I'm looking forward to next year.
And they're
like,
just around the corner, yeah.
That's what motivates the purchase, right? Like, especially when it's a new thing and it's sought after, and maybe there isn't a huge library that you're already excited for, right? Like, that's why those things happen. And like, I definitely agree with you. Like, they just shouldn't, right? Like, it's like, stop overcommitting and under-delivering when it would be just as easy to keep hyping us up for these games and just not promise a release window, you know? Just be transparent about where it's at. Even if it was
like, it's gonna be like fall 2022 or winter 2022, and then it slipped back, right? Or even if you just said 2022 and it's been pushed to 2023, I don't think that matters as much. Like a year or a window or whatever, Forza Motorsport, they've given it a 2023 release date. It's probably going to be like November, December now, with Starfield coming out in September. I can't imagine that Forza Motorsport comes before then. That's probably going to be their very last game of the year, if not pushed back into 2024.
So here's the question. Do you think this is safe?
Oh yeah, big time. Yeah, this date is real now. I don't think the 11/11/22 was ever a realistic timeline for them. It was just a date that aligned with the Skyrim release date, right, of 11/11/11.
Are we
And they
worried
wanted to
about it
kinda
though?
hit that.
Like, do you think it's going to come in hot, or do you think it's going to come in and it's gotten enough time now to percolate?
No hotter than any other Bethesda game. I think it's that they're always
Yeah, no.
they're always
Imagine
full
that's the
of
bar,
clunk.
right? Like, imagine
Yeah,
that's
I
the
think it'll
bar.
be fine.
Yeah, I think this is going to be. It'll be received as well as like Fallout 4 was, I would say possibly, but I don't know if it's going to have the staying power of like Skyrim or something, which we're still buying. and
That's the
playing
question.
later. But I would like to, I'm not a big fantasy guy. I'm a bigger sci-fi guy. I would like to have a Skyrim for me. A game that's like Skyrim in ways that I can enjoy.
Let me tell you about
With
Have you
Avowed.
played
flying around.
Fallout?
I started Fallout New Vegas, made a character, stepped outside and was like, "Oh, I'm bored," so I stopped playing.
What about Outer Worlds?
Worlds hated.
Oh, I love that game. I love the
Yeah.
Outer Worlds. Oh, it's so good.
I just find the RPG stuff not interesting at all.
I don't
And I
think you're gonna be
find-
in on Starfield.
I don't
then,
think
'cause
you'll
I
like
kind
it.
of feel like this is a similar style game with elements of that Hello Games game. Fuck, what's it called?
No Man's Sky.
No Man's Sky. Yeah,
Okay.
with elements of No Man's Sky. in
No
there.
Man's Skyrim. You remember those memes?
Well, like I said, I'll just wait. I'll wait then. But yeah, I'm
I mean,
not
it's coming to
excited
Game
or not
Pass. There's no
excited,
reason
but-
not to check it out
Yeah.
at this
Yeah.
point.
It's gonna be
Right.
interesting because, like, I think you're probably right. I think it'll hit this year. It's just weird because, like, we talked about last year, right? Like, it was a quieter year from them. I don't know that it was like. I think they had more good games than people will give them credit for, but a lot of them were small. But it's like looking at this year, it's like we already had Hi-Fi Rush, we already have Age of Empires 2 Definitive Edition, Minecraft Legends is out in 2 months, or not even, it's next month. And then we've got Forza, we've got Age of Empires 4, and then we've got Starfield, and then the vampire one. Why can't I remember its name?
Redfall.
Redfall.
And we obviously had Hi-Fi Rush. Last year, though, they officially only published 2 games, which was Pentiment and Grounded. And Grounded already existed. It was just the 1.0 release.
Yeah.
No, that's not
Last
true.
year
They
was
also
a-
did. They also did As Dusk Falls. They had As Dusk Falls.
Wasn't that published? Oh, I guess maybe that was published
Yeah,
by them.
they
but
published
it
it.
wasn't developed by them, right?
No, it's Interior Night is the studio, but they're an indie studio that are made up of folks that were at Quantic Dream.
Yeah, they had all their funding yanked by Sega and then shipped it around from what I
Yeah,
heard.
and now they work with Xbox. But yeah, they had that, Forza, Grounded, and then Age of Empires 4.
Oh, no, Forza was the year prior. Forza was 2021.
Forza. Oh, the Hot Wheels DLC came out.
Yeah.
And
last
then
year?
Pentiment.
Yeah. Pentiment was a highlight for me, but
I loved Pentiment. Yeah.
small games, just
True.
like 3 kind of indie titles, 2 from Obsidian, and then 1 from an external studio. Well, the rest of your first party studios doing. Age of Empires, that came out in 2021, and that's also a third party studio. That's Relic. It's owned by Sega, so it's kind of like, what are you doing with your internal studios? What are they up to?
I mean, that's the thing. They're working on all these games. It's like we know that
Yeah.
like you have Obsidian's working on Avowed, right? And there's Outer Worlds too.
Oh yeah, Obsidian is like a AA powerhouse of Microsoft. I genuinely don't understand how they put out so much stuff.
They have
Because we knew about Avowed and
4
the Outer
teams?
Worlds too, but then they've also done Pentiment and Grounded, which are like 2 different offshoots. I can imagine we'll probably see Pillars of Eternity show back up at some point. 'Cause
Yeah.
I'm sure Microsoft wants them to do something with that.
Well, Avowed is set in that universe too.
Oh, is it? I didn't know that. That's cool.
Yeah, I didn't know that either. But yeah, somebody told me this
That's
the other
really
day, and I was
cool.
like, oh, that's
Wait,
awesome.
in what universe?
The Pillars of Eternity universe.
Pillars of Eternity.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. It's the world of Eora, as I think how you say that, Eora. But yeah, so we have that. There's also we have 2 other. There's the Age of Mythology retold. Age of Empires mobile is being worked on. Rare's working on Everwild. Avalanche is working on Contraband. We have Playground Games working on Fable. The Initiative and Crystal Dynamics on Perfect Dark. Senua's Saga Hellblade 2 from Ninja Theory's around the corner. State of Decay 3.
That's got to be at least next year now. That's not coming out this year, right?
Maybe
I thought we'd have saw that. I thought we'd have saw that before we saw Starfield at this point, or
or,
before we saw another
or
Forza game.
Redfall. Yeah, like I don't know. I
Yeah.
thought it was gonna come sooner, but maybe it's next year now. I don't know. I guess it could be later this year. Maybe they want to like make good right on not having games from last year. I don't know though.
Maybe it's a shadow drop at their presentation or something.
Yeah,
They
like
did a
Hi-Fi
shadow
Rush.
drop with Hi-Fi Rush. Yeah, I could see that working
Could
for them
be.
again, especially with something that people were excited about and they knew about already. Release a sequel to one of their big acquisitions.
Yeah, and then like maybe drum up interest in people to go back and play the first one on Game Pass too. You
Yeah.
do the 1-2 punch like during like a quiet time of the year. I don't know. It's
June's pretty packed though, right?
Yeah. Maybe do it in the winter, but I think either way, even if some of these games get delayed, this should be the biggest year for Microsoft's first-party studios since the Series X was launched. So
Oh yeah,
You hope
absolutely.
so,
Yeah.
Is that? It's not really a
Yeah.
high. It's not really a high bar to hit. Though.
certainly is not.
Difficult.
I wonder how we'll feel about it at the end of the year, because I think if the end of the year rolls around and all these games do hit and they're all as good as expected, and Sony only has Spider-Man 2 to show, that, I think that might change the perception quite a bit in terms of the whole like Xbox doesn't have games thing, which has largely held true, right? Like we've had a pretty small number of big, AAA releases at least from them, since it's been no more than 2, right? Whereas this will have what, 3 plus all of these other indie experiences as well. It's definitely a much better offering. But you got to wonder, do all of them cross the finish line? And I don't know.
I think they do. I think they've been nervous about announcing dates, and we had that developer direct where they announced the Redfall date. We got the deep dive on Forza Motorsport, and they announced that it was coming this year. I think they were bullish, and it probably was to sell consoles, but I think they'll probably rein it in a little bit. And obviously, if the Activision Blizzard deal closes, we may see some of those games show up on Game Pass. Maybe you get Diablo 4 on Game Pass, which would be a huge win for them. A big title come into Game Pass from a new acquisition. But that may take time. I remember the Bethesda stuff took a while to show up as well.
Yeah, because there's obviously whatever potential existing deals and all that stuff that need to run their course, but yeah, I mean that would be something that I think could also like prove to be a big boon for them, right? Is like bringing something like Overwatch 2 or Diablo or whatever, and having
World of Warcraft as like a part of PC Game Pass.
Sure, right. Those are all opportunities for them to, I think, kind of hang their hat on that. But again, it's like, are people excited about them bringing old content to Game Pass in that same way? Like, yeah, I'm sure, but it doesn't assuage any of what we've complained about, right? Like, we've played plenty of games on Game Pass and enjoyed lots of games on Game Pass, but how many of them were the big AAA releases from the Xbox studios that are fresh, new, exciting games? It's like, it's a short list, I think for me, it's like, it's Halo, and then a bunch of indie games that were awesome and unexpected.
Oh, Forza was huge for me. It's got to be your game, right? And I think this year it's probably going to be your game for a lot of people. If it's not Redfall, it's Starfield. If it's not Starfield, it's Hi-Fi Rush. If it's not Hi-Fi Rush, it's Forza Motorsport or whatever else they've got kind of in line. There's also like Persona, right? That they've got Persona 4 Golden, Persona 3 Portable. We've got Persona 5. They're all on Game Pass. There's a lot of reasons to subscribe. I just think it's a real shame that last year was a dud because they had to shift these 2 games that they were kind of pinning their hopes on into 2023, and now one of them's been shifted again. I'm glad it has. I always think you should delay a game if it's not right. We saw that Suicide Squad's seemingly getting delayed as well. It's the right thing to do. If a game's not right, delay it, because you can fix it, I think, prior to it being a disastrous launch.
Especially when you've invested so much time into it already. Like something like Starfield, where it's been in development for the better part of a decade. It's like, and again, right, we've talked about how they've had all these high-profile fucking L's the last couple of years. Like, they know that they have something to prove. They know that this is a game that needs to come out and hit and be a W. And I think that's not just for Xbox, that's for Bethesda, like even more so. They want this to come out and be a Skyrim, not a Cyberpunk. And I hope they can hit that bar. I really do. I think it would be so cool and so special to get a brand new, Western RPG that is like a new IP that, makes it feel like they take the crown back. Right? It felt like ever since like Witcher 3 that like nobody thinks of Bethesda as like the open world, Western RPG studio anymore. And for so long that was their identity. And like I would love to see a return to form for them and have it be something that that really sets the world on fire, I don't feel like we've seen enough to know if it can clear that bar, but you got to hope that this time that they've taken the last 2 years, right, of extra time, materialized and that it's come together and that what we've got is something to be excited about.
Yeah.
Fingers crossed. I'm looking forward to it.
Hope. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, whatever it ends up being, we'll be here to report on it for you and gab about it. So if you guys want to talk about Starfield or any of the other stuff we talked about today, remember you can write into us in a bunch of different ways. You can hit us up at questions@flipscreen.games. You can come join our Discord. However you want to get involved, head over to flipscreen.games. That's our website where you will find links to all the ways that you can get involved with the show, how you can become a Patreon supporter. However you choose to get involved, we thank you for tuning into this week's show and being a member of the FlipScreen Games community. For the crew, I've been Pete. He's been Steve. He's been Max. We'll see you next week.
Bye.